Welcome back to Landman Now, podcasting the profession, brought to you by the American Association of Professional Landmen. I'm your host, Chad Smith, and in this episode of our Landman TV series companion podcast, we'll be covering season 2, episode 3 of Paramount's Landman TV show, where we separate the fact from the fiction, highlighting the real work behind the drama. Joining the show today, we have Allyson Howard and Michael Anderson. Thank you both so much for joining us. And before we get started, if you don't mind, give the audience a little bit of background on yourself. Allyson, if you'd like to go first.
Thank you, Chad. So I've been a professional landman since 2005, and I've had the pleasure of working in the field, working in-house, upstream, midstream, traditional, non-traditional, and new and alternative energies, all the things. And for the last 3.5 years, I've worked as the land acquisition manager for North America for Fortescue, their energy division.
Well, very good. And Michael, you want to give the audience a little background on you?
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Michael Anderson, 15-year landman. Got started in the industry in 2011 as a contractor for Chesapeake, kind of handling a lot of their new basin leasing, Powder River, Mississippian extension play into Kansas, as well as kind of the Colorado, Kansas border. Worked on, work from the field to the operations side. Did, mineral management for a family office, and currently the director of land and regulatory for several different business units under the Venator Resources umbrella, and manage a lot of our Rockies operations from a non-op, operated, and everything in between perspective.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you both for joining the show and uh, coming on to break down the episode. So
Yeah.
today we're gonna, like I said, take on episode 3 of season 2. This one gives us a little bit of a field work, financial surprises, and some real world issues that touch on the oil and gas industry. So we'll start with that dramatic opening. Episode 3 opens with the scene of hunters collapsing almost instantly. Later, we learn that that is the same site that Tommy had sent Dale and his crew to evaluate. When Dale and his crew arrive, they find the bodies, and his gas monitoring alarm shows that there's hydrogen sulfide. So before this episode, I didn't know much about hydrogen sulfide, and after some quick research, learned that it can, and as the show shows, can be very lethal. Is that something either of you have ever encountered or heard of happening in real operations?
I personally have not, gotten sick from it or breathed it in or whatever. I've definitely operated a field that had a high H2S content, and there's safety protocols in place. So I'm glad to see that MTechs were wearing their sensors. But sad for the hunters. You think you would hope there would be some sort of signage posted, and if they were the outfit on the brand on the side of their side by side or whatever. That was a very fancy whatever it was they were hunting out of. It looked like a legit outfit, so I would think they would know better. But this stuff happens, and I don't know. I don't want to steal everything from Michael, but I've known of other companies where they kind of had cows penned up along certain points as their canaries in the coal mine. So if the cow goes down, you better run. Not
Yeah,
not saying that that's recommended, but it's true.
we do have an operation in the Piceance Basin, which is gas and is H2S heavy. And I did notice that I didn't see a windsock on top of tanks, which is normally kind of helps operations folks whenever they are in the field with their monitors kind of help which direction the wind's blowing so they can go the opposite direction. But to Allison's point, there are safety protocols with a lot of the organizations and companies that operate to handle those type of matters specifically. And it's a big,
Was the setup of the scene that the current or prior operator had just kind of like gone defunct, or
I think
uh,
so. They'd pretty much ceased operations and they were trying to offload this. So maybe it had sat there for a while, or I don't. I mean that's kind of way they
like you can tell it's not being maintained? Like,
right.
it wasn't there. I think it was later in the scene. Tommy references that was the field that they were trying to buy
Yeah.
and
well,
get.
there comes a point where his attorney says, yeah, that's the one, we're interested in buying it. Is it
Well, that,
still worth it, even with all of that liability
Mhm.
and extra maintenance and everything? Yeah.
yeah, in episode 2, he's getting ready to go up to the funeral home and he talks to boss and he's like, I want you to go look at this field. It's one that is near some of the stuff that we're already doing, and we think we can get it for, I think he said like 60 cents on a dollar or something like
Mhm.
that. But basically these guys have gone bankrupt and they're just trying to offload as whatever they can.
Yeah.
Um, but what causes an H2S release like the one that they showed? Is it just build up and not maintaining things, or how does something like that happen?
I mean, I think it could be a lot of different things, but something's leaking.
Yeah.
And clearly their equipment, be it a pipeline, be it a tank, is not properly maintained. It could be a valve. Not that it's like, I don't know, but it's like there are a lot of different possibilities. What do
Yeah.
you think,
So
Michael?
I know from our standpoint, we have stuff operated in New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas, or had Texas at one point in time. And the state does implement rules from an air quality standpoint that those sites do have to be monitored depending on how much gas is produced, either on a semi-annual basis or a quarterly basis with LDAR cameras or FLIR cameras, which show where gas is leaking out of those valves. They do tag those valves, and you do have a certain period of time that you have to either tighten them up and be in compliance and then report that to the state, or there will be a fine imposed. So, yeah, to defunct, you would think that the state would have had some sort of signage, caution, something out there that kind of signified, hey, kind of beware, if you would.
And we don't know the extent of this property. Along the boundary, there could have been warning signs that we just don't see in the
Right.
scene.
And is that hydrogen sulfide, is that something that's already in the ground and it just happens to come out whenever? Okay, so it's not like it's a byproduct of sitting in a tank or something
It's
like
it's a naturally occurring
that. Mhm.
substance. Yeah.
Certain basins have more of it than others. Um, I know, for example, Utah, we have little to no H2S because of the product, the waxy crude that's produced out of the basin, which is what makes it a lot more profitable. But yeah, it's basin specific for sure.
So once that alarm goes off on the scene, the tone shifts and brings us to the kind of the safety preparedness aspect of it. I think in some of the earlier episodes of Landman, we've seen them take some creative liberties with the way the safety practices are played out. But this time, the response to the gas leak felt a little more in line with a real life emergency protocol. So, from your perspective, how accurately did the show portray the crew's response once they recognized the H2S leak?
I thought it was fine. I was very relieved that they were wearing their monitors and that they had the masks.
Mm.
Michael?
I totally agree. They responded swiftly, kept the guy on top of the tanks, which, normally you don't stand on top of tanks that long, but, it is Hollywood. So, but yeah, I feel like they followed the safety protocols, acted swiftly, and did what in my opinion, a normal operation would have done in that instance to get this solution and fixed quickly. So
Yeah.
The
Now,
staying on top of the tank I think they said that the gas is a heavier gas, so it's going to stay lower to the ground. So it'd
right,
be,
unless the wind blew it up.
mhm,
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just me being overly cautious, but if you're going to a property that's not even yours, you don't, they seem to be coming in pretty blind.
for sure.
Maybe it would have been better practice to already have your mask hanging around your neck if you're going to walk up there by yourself, just
Agreed.
saying.
and so
Well,
oh, go ahead.
to Allison's point, yeah. I mean, if you know that most of the time you know what is present and H2S is an option. So yeah, to Allison's point, having the H2S monitor, the mask, having everything before you kind of even step out of the truck, because you are in West Texas, it is windy. The wind does pick up and you never know.
Yeah, and is that is H2S monitor? I mean, the mask obviously that seems like something that pretty much everybody working in that in a field like that should probably carry. Is H2S monitor pretty standard equipment as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, either on your shirt or on your hard hat
yeah.
normally.
So safety is kind of like the first layer of that site, but after an incident like that, the next big question is cleanup and to that cost. So Allison, I think you kind of mentioned already where later in the episode Dale returns home and he's talking to Nate about the site and says it could cost around 20 million to clean it up, but that the production potential makes it worthwhile. And he also mentions increasing the wrongful death coverage. So, a few questions on this. Uh, is the estimate for $20 million a realistic range? And if so, what level of remediation does that involve?
Whoa. I
Yeah.
mean, I think they're just throwing a number out there that's possible because we don't have enough information to know because we're just seeing like one tank. I'm assuming that this is like a field that has multiple wellheads, and you'd have to do a full inspection to know the extent of necessary um, remediation. So, yeah.
Well, and I think kind of what they missed, I mean, normal course of business, if you do go to a site and you are looking at purchasing it, there are, phase one site evaluations, phase two, which kind of handle, phase one, obviously, are there any leaky tanks? Are there any spills? Phase two dives in and does, dirt sampling and things like that. So, that you would have assumed would have already been done before they would have even shown up. And that then tells you as well, it helps you evaluate that price point that was mentioned of site cleanup.
I assumed the character was just speaking from experience, like he's been around so long that he's just gonna guess, like, I'll bet you it's gonna be 20 million. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think that was like the official number, then they're writing the check.
Yeah, and it may have just been, we don't know what we're stepping into, but if this one's that bad, then let's assume all of them are bad type of
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
Well, if a company is willing to put out $20 million in cleanup, you would assume that that indicates a pretty long-term production potential. But, and I mean, that part's kind of obvious, but is the H2S something to consider with the production as well? Is that going to continue to slow down production, or is that something that you're going to have to constantly fight with as you're producing? Or, I mean, how does that come into play with the future production, I guess?
I think it's just part of that particular field. It's a normal element there, and that's going to be part of how you manage the field and manage the H2S.
Yeah, agreed. A lot of times they have things in place to kind of mitigate that, to help kind of, you know, keep it subdued, if you would. And knowing that gases, the natural gas or whatever the condensate, is what you're truly wanting, companies will pay to, help, mitigate that H2S with those wells to, see the upside in oil production or gas production.
And then they mentioned the wrongful death policy. Do you think that was something that they wanted to increase because they're worried about risk for their workers going forward, or do you think that they would be anticipating lawsuits for those hunters' deaths, which maybe that wouldn't fall on under them since they didn't purchase it yet, or I don't know. Just kind of if you could maybe clear up some of that on.
My opinion is that it was a joke, maybe in
Oh,
poor taste.
Well, I mean, I know.
They're going to have whatever is coverages are necessary, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I know normally you put those in place for your workers and your contractors who are visiting the locations, and just to have ample coverage as it relates to those potential liabilities.
But it is normal to have multiple things going on one property, right?
For
So
sure.
let's say you've got some oil and gas production, and you've got some farming, and you've got some hunting leases. And so, if you're the owner of the land and you're the owner and you're the operator of the well, you'll all have to be um, in open and honest communication about what are the operations going on there, who is there, when, why, is it, who's allowed to be there. If you own the land and you want to make money from hunting leases, then that's an important thing to talk to the operator about. Because you want yourself, if you're the one hunting, or your people that are paying you to be there to be safe, right? So everybody needs to talk about this and determine, is it a safe thing to allow? And if so, what are our safety protocols going to be, and what insurance policies do we need?
Correct. Yeah. No, we have some stuff where we've got some center pivot irrigation systems here in Utah where we own the surface, and we do farm those out to, a tenant, and he does farm the ground and maintain the ground. And, as part of our contract with him, he also has a half a policy as well. So, we also cover the ground, but they also too cover the ground with certain thresholds as it relates to insurance.
as you're negotiating a lease with someone, if you know that they have hunters on a separate lease, right? So a situation similar to this one, is that something that would deter you from wanting to leave, or are you going to try and negotiate a better deal because you're going to have to contend with, okay, well, I know these hunters are out here at this time, so we're going to have to coordinate around that. Does anything like that ever come into play?
I mean, the tables are usually turned in the opposite direction when that's
Yeah.
going on.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's usually the landowner with the hunting lease operations that has the upper hand there, and you do what you can to accommodate him and his other business.
Yeah, we had a outfit that owned or had guided hunts on some property here in Utah, and pretty much if we were going to work over any well in the near future between these dates, which normally coincided with hunting season or goose season, we had to pay him a hefty fine, hefty annual rental. And so, I would always have to go to our operation saying, hey, are we going to rework any of these wells? Because if so, then it's going to trigger this clause. And to Allison's point, yeah, they do hold a lot of the cards. But I think honestly, at the end of the day, having open and honest dialogue with the landowner and saying, hey, stuff will come up. And so, yes, we understand contractually you want this, but we are going to have to access certain locations during certain times if something or emergency arises.
Another question I had, and this kind of is just going off on this topic, but let's say a landowner is not the mineral owner. No, and you're dealing with both at this point. Um, and the landowner is like, well, I don't own the mineral rights. The guy who owned this before me owns the mineral rights. You have a deal with him. You're still having to work a deal with the landowner. How does that work out? If are you kind of at this guy's will, or you already have a agreement with this other person?
I
Um,
mean, I know I always answer first, so I'm going to zip my lip and let Michael go first.
So that, in my experience, is probably the hardest negotiation I've ever had to do because the surface owner is going to want his pound of flesh because he knows that he's not getting any production from those minerals. And so, and he knows he's hamstrung at that point too. He knows that you're going to have to pay him or at least give him a little bit more because of that, because the surface is a big component of your operation. So it is a lot of it in my experience. Allyson, you may have a different one, but that is probably the hardest negotiation. I'll tell one story, and then I'll turn it over to Allyson. So I worked for Chaparral Energy in Oklahoma, and they operated in Osage County. Well, the whole county of Osage is BIA minerals, but then you also have large surface owners like the Drummond Ranch. I had to do a lot of this negotiations with the Drummonds about right of ways, surface pipelines, even cattle farmers. And those guys understand they're behind the eight ball, understand that the BIA gets the minerals and the royalties. And I think if you keep an honest and open dialogue with them and you work with them, you'll get what you need done. But they definitely require more, in my opinion.
So I would just to speak to the technicalities in case your listening audience is here because they're curious about the nerdy landman stuff. So you're bringing up a situation where one or more parties owns the minerals and a different party owns the surface, often referred to as a split estate. So in that case, you have your contracts that are governing the mineral exploration and production, so your leases and your joint operating agreements or whatever. But then when you approach the surface owner, you're getting some form of surface use agreement from them. And if we want to make it more complicated or nerdy or whatever, next level would be people have gotten savvy because they've been through it all. And so they already have agreements in place between the mineral and the surface owner that limit where exploration and production activities can take place. So there will be, let's say you owned fee simple, you owned all the surface and mineral rights. For whatever reason, you are selling some of your rights. And you want to still be able to control what's happening on the surface. So let's say you're selling the minerals, you need the money, and you're farming the surface. Well, at that time of the severance, if you're savvy, you can go ahead and carve out like certain areas that would be set aside for surface operations or right of ways or whatever. I actually think that's a good idea if you're in that position. Some people, for financial reasons, are going to have to sell some of their rights from time to time, and just be forward thinking and try to make sure that everyone can still get along and make money, right? I want people to think about this as, hey, let's all get along and let's all make money. Instead of a lot of times what you experience when you come meet someone and start talking to them about this is just a pushback, like, I don't want to do it, or I don't want to have anything to do with it, or I'm going to make it hard for you, or I'm going to hold out longer because then I'll get more money, which is kind of ironic because time is money. So like the longer it takes to do something, the less you should be paying them. I'm just
Yeah.
saying. Anyway, so there are some people that they operate like that. Like I know some pipeline companies that they tell you from the very get-go. They say, look, if you'll take the offer now, this is when we'll pay this bigger bonus. But if we have to go to condemnation, you just get the appraised value. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I think that's smart. But anyway,
Just be upfront about it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
the interesting thing is certain states have certain laws that help kind of promote oil and gas development. Oklahoma has the Surface Damage Act, to where if there is that split estate, um, that the mineral owner, you have a right to develop the minerals, and the surface is owned separately. That if you negotiate in good faith, you have fair negotiations, you can get your location where it is. But then you also have to factor in, the what was it, the accommodation doctrine, where if there is a pivot there, then you have to accommodate it. So there's a lot of different things. I know the state of Wyoming is to Allison's point, everybody gets fair and reasonable shake at consideration as it relates to surface use agreements, or mineral owner leasing. So um, states have also put things in place to protect operators, but also protect surface owners as well in these split estate instances.
Yeah, so that would be a good one for your listeners to go look up if they're not already familiar with it, is the accommodation doctrine. And I think something that we've been taking for granted that maybe a listener that's new to all this might not already know is that the mineral estate does have primacy. It's the dominant estate. In other words, if there's a different person owns the surface, they can't stop a mineral owner from producing their minerals, right? Like you can't trap someone else's property, just like on the surface, you got to give somebody an easement or a right of way or something to get to their lot. You're going to have to eventually work it out if you want to raise it all the way up to the court. The court is going to say, look, you cannot stop someone else from accessing their property. So it's kind of that idea.
yeah, I don't know. It's something I've always wondered about. So glad I could have two experts kind of answer my like. Anyways, we'll get back to the episode here. But at the kind of moving from that to, we'll say, back to Fort Worth, Cammy is dealing with a different kind of mess. Uh, at the end of at the end of episode two, Cammy starts digging into Monty's records, and episode three shows us kind of how tangled the finances really are, and maybe some of the questionable accounting or irregularities that are happening there. Um, so from what we see, how would you interpret the financial moves Monty was making? Do they look like just smart tax strategies, or was it kind of edging into maybe he was doing something shady? As somebody who's, you know, not a the most business and LLC and subsidiary savvy person, I kind of wanted to get some input there. Michael, you and I kind of talked offline about this, so maybe if you want to answer first on this one.
Yeah, so I've worked a lot of different places, uh, and I think what you're seeing nowadays is these siloed entities. For example, a lot of companies have an umbrella company to where all of their allocations or their accounting, revenue reporting, JIB, that type of stuff flows through, and then it gets passed down to the LLC level or the business unit level. Um, and what you see there, and kind of some of the things that I've experienced from a benefit perspective, is you're siloing the company. So we have operations in 5 different states, and each of those different states has an individual operating LLC. Um, they all have oil and gas production. They're all bonded in those LLC names. Um, and it is, but everything rolls up to that umbrella company. Um, that helps with kind of siloing those assets in the event there is, distress during the low commodity environment. That also kind of helps. I know we have some surface where we do a lot of solar. We have a big solar field that helps kind of run some of our operations in California. Well, that LLC structure helped with subsidies to get some of the stuff paid for at the time. So there are certain things in certain states have certain tax codes that I feel like can kind of play to those, how many LLCs, how many companies, and how you structure your organization to help with helping with some of the tax burden, helping with some of um, the ad valorem or whatever at the state level. But obviously, you would have to go consult your tax professional on that and factor in the state tax codes as well. But a lot of people are doing the silos, which do help with um, keeping those companies protected in the event that there is some distress time in the market.
Absolutely. I think it's normal business practice to want to separate liabilities. So let's say you've got pipelines in Louisiana and I don't know, some solar panels in Texas and some oil wells in Utah. I mean, those are they might as well be completely separate companies, really. And maybe at one time they were, and then through a series of acquisitions, so structurally and with the insurance coverage and everything, think of it like this, like if it's all just one company, somebody can go after all the assets and hurt those other projects that have nothing to do with whatever imaginary, theoretical disaster happens at one of those sites. So it's totally normal for them to be separated. I think they are uh, making it dramatic. I was
For sure.
surprised that he broke a beer bottle over an attorney's head. Also, very suspicious of the attorney for not returning her call for multiple days. Like,
Mhm.
I'm more concerned that in a future episode, we're going to find out he's embezzling or something. You know what I mean? But because why would your attorney, like, that's ridiculous. Get a new attorney. But yeah, I think there's more information that we will learn. But from what I heard that was interesting to me was that at a top level for what was it to like pay people their incomes or something that account for distribution was in an estate. So like for because it was a family, I guess for those family employees, it was in an estate. Do I remember that correctly from the episode?
That
Because they
it
were
all
talking
happened quick.
about, yeah, they were saying that the trick there was that because he put it in an estate, now that he's died, it will have to go through probate court.
Yes, that he definitely.
Probate court is not a next day thing, right? If you need the money now, that ain't gonna happen. And that's why now, we see the drug cartel, and I'll let you get to that, Chad. I'm sure it's in your list of things. But I mean, there's a famous probate case in Harris County that I don't know if it'll ever close. It's been open for decades. So, and they keep it open on purpose. So, yeah.
Yikes.
It's one of those things. I tried following it, like I kind of like went back and then kind of watched it again. Um, and that seemed again overly complex, but that's Hollywood speaking. But there are those instances where that LLC structure is overly complex. But again, you would trust that accounting had access and you knew how the structure was flowing, and hopefully you would catch it before it got to that point, or at
Hopefully
least.
it's all above board and we have yet to know all the information, but I still think the attorney was acting a little shady.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely acting shady, and I think the show's trying to make you question, is all this above board or not?
Yeah.
They mentioned well, there's an account in Nassau. It's like, okay, so there's an international account. So what was
Oh,
that?
yeah. Okay. Thank you for reminding me. The international drilling company part,
Yeah,
like, I was like, I thought this was MTEX. Like,
yeah.
Mhm.
what is this? So there's maybe things we're all gonna find out. So I don't know.
Maybe this lawyer accountant guy is embezzling money, and
Well,
can
and it's interesting that he changed his like what did he promote Tommy to VP Ops or I don't know, and
President,
then
I
Vice
think, right?
President. But at the same time, like he's on his deathbed and he promotes the girl that has no like oil and gas experience to like be general counsel, I think, in-house general
Yeah.
counsel. So and she has no idea the inner workings of the company. So that's an interesting move too, because like, oh, right before I die, let me put this someone in charge of this who has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, it's setting it up where, I mean, it could be something where it's like, oh no, Monty just had this what would look like everybody else a mess, but he knew exactly what everything was.
Yeah.
Or was it intentional because he was doing something shady, and this lawyer accountant guy is the only person left who knows the things that were going on. But speaking of shady, uh, so the cartel boss, I think Galino is his name, Andy Garcia's character.
Hmm.
They have drinks, and
Sonrisa, his company.
yeah,
Smile in Espanol.
Yeah.
so they're having drinks, and Cammy's there, and then towards the end of it, he kind of says, I invest in people, and you're someone I think's worth investing in, or something to that line. So if they are missing all this money, and he has all this money that he needs to, essentially launder or whatever to invest in, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that we're going to see an influx of money, and then the cartel just gets further ingrained into that? Maybe that's their way in to the MTEX.
Well, Intex is under a drilling obligation right now for their
Right.
offshore blowout or whatever. So right now it looks like, you know, the cartel investor has an in. This might have them over a barrel. We'll see.
Yeah, that's one area that I haven't learned is the offshore component. Um, but those drilling obligations are no joke. So yeah, it's one of the biggest things during due diligence of, is there a drilling obligation? And you flush that out first and foremost, and you put that, whatever sticky mark on it, on the project. But yeah, definitely want to earmark that as a big hurdle, for doing any sort of acquisition, for sure.
Yeah, and it seemed like, at least from the previous episode, that it was the insurance company who was giving them the drilling obligation because they've paid them the money for whatever had happened. Um, am I getting that right?
What's that?
Well, the insurance made the payout, but they didn't make the payout according to the contract, which I'm waiting for this question because this was my favorite detail in the show. But it's I believe that it's another party to probably the JOA with another owner that is uh enforcing the drilling provision, the drilling obligation. Yeah.
And now I maybe
Michael, were you clear on the identity of the, suits on the other side of the table from her that
It made it sound like the the suits on the other side were acting on behalf of this party triggering this drilling obligation, is what I
and they were
read.
like but to Chad's comment, their client is an owner, not the insurance company.
Correct. That's how I kind of gathered it. And some of that was fuzzy just on, how quickly the exchanges were. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's how I gathered the details to that level as it relates
But
to.
so that was my favorite part was when she gets them with because they are the ones that say it that they paid the payment not according to the contract. She's like, well, then you already violated the contract. So now we don't have, you can't hold us to it now. And look, yes, contractually, there can be all kinds of little ways to wiggle out of that. But assuming those were not written in and it's just simply like this is what happens if there's blowout and you trigger the drilling obligation and you pay based on this schedule of performance, da, 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 and these, she has a great point. They've already violated the contract. So now what are you going to do? Like I loved that. I loved it.
And so,
Well,
oh, go ahead, Michael.
it was interesting to me that they almost didn't even know that they had offshore stuff to
Mhm.
where, you would have thought and normally that would have been addressed what way back. It wouldn't have gotten to that point, but it was interesting that, that was even like, well, we didn't know we had it.
Yeah, I think it must have been connected to a prior acquisition, and it seems like our main landman, his focus area was just onshore in Texas, right?
Mhm.
And more than that, just mostly the West Texas stuff. Like he doesn't even want to mess with the East Texas stuff, right? But it's onshore. So, and once again, he got a deathbed promotion. So, it may have just been Monty that knew that they got, because I mean, I think they were saying how, and I'd have to go back and rewatch season one, but I seem to think of remembering like Monty sitting across having drinks with somebody, and I think he was like finagling that this not so kosher insurance payout schedule because he needed the money for the acquisition they were doing to rework all those, or was it just financing, reworking all those wells or deepening all the wells or something in season one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you might be
So
onto something with that.
he
Yeah.
needed money for that. And so he knew what was going on. I need to know, like, okay, who was the offshore layman that got laid off that went away with all the knowledge?
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
now Tommy's left holding the bag. How many times, okay, Michael, how many times has that happened to you? Like the person that knew, the person that was doing the thing, like they're laid off, they're fired, and then like there's someone just like, oh well, I guess I'm gonna learn how to do this now.
Yeah. So in 15 years, I've experienced three bankruptcies, of which there was two at one organization. And it was to Allison's point, it's like, oh, hey, we laid off the full surface and right of way team for all of the company. It's yours now. And then you start kind of uncovering these skeletons that you're like, I call them gremlins because when you feed them water at night, they like become mean. Uh, and that's honestly what it felt like in this instance was like just something that just someone got let go and completely missed it, and now you're having to deal with the ramifications.
hmm And it could be that the person that got let go was dealing with it, but maybe the company doesn't have the best record keeping or ways of, keep transferring all that to the next person or whatever. I've
Mhm.
experienced that.
When you're drilling offshore, don't I mean, and again, I could be way off here, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but don't those leases typically come from federal, aren't they federally granted, the offshore leases?
Depends on how offshore you are, I guess, because Texas is unique at what do we have, 30 miles?
30 miles off, yeah.
Yeah, so 30 miles from the coast is state. And then beyond that would be the federal government. Yeah.
Okay, so if would either the I guess if they're in Texas or Louisiana or whatever, would the state be or the federal government being the ones that are enforcing this requirement for drilling?
And I'm not an offshore person. I want
Yeah.
like that's my I would love to get that experience. So I don't want to give a wrong answer, but it sounds like it would be either there are like joint operators, that have terms, or the mineral owner being the state or the federal government has a requirement. But I don't know.
You see a lot of these contracts and news breaks that come out, and a lot of times, to Allison's point, it is three companies that are either a third, a third, a third, or whatever, because it is so expensive to develop offshore, and it does take time for those wells to come online. I really wish that I had a friend of mine who works at Chevron in their kind of offshore area, and she lives in actually Israel. But she would be a
Can we phone
great.
a friend?
I know. I wish I could. I wish I could.
It's yeah, that's interesting. I was because as we are talking about who is enforcing that, and is that going to come back into play at some point, you know?
But the bottom line is it's a contractual obligation, right?
For sure.
So that was basically like a contractual argument that attorneys for both sides were having. And the point was made that the complaining party, as it turns out, actually was the first to violate the contract. So
So
Yeah.
overall, it seems like a pretty realistic situation then.
I think that either has happened or could totally happen. Yes. Again,
Mhm.
I don't work offshore, but I know that that could happen inland. That could happen onshore for sure.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Well, that kind of wraps up the questions that I had on or for today's episode. So did you all have anything else that you wanted to cover or mention that I didn't get to?
my advice would be please do not go house shopping for mansions in Fort Worth. And you have all of this going on. Be conservative. I mean, that goes for everyone everywhere. Please live beneath your means. Please save for your retirement and your children's future. And if you don't have kids, just remember who is going to care to come wipe your butt someday, okay? Just plan for the future. Don't spend it all right now. You don't have to have the car or the boat or the whatever, please. That's all I'm saying. That's my parting advice.
Great parting advice. Michael.
Well, no, I agree with that, and I think really since oil went negative um, during COVID, I think there has been a shift in operators kind of wrenching back production, um, and kind of being more mindful of projects and budgets. And to Allison's point, in this industry, it's boom and bust, and I think that that's been mentioned several times through kind of the season one of there's an ideal sweet spot for commodity prices, and seeing that people go crazy when it's north of 100. But yeah, it operating with discretion when it comes to living below your means, and just being prudent with decisions during good times, and being mindful of what matters most. I think is is it family, is it um, you know just being mindful of those things.
Mhm.
Well, it's great parting advice from both of you. So appreciate that. Well, that wraps up this episode of Landman Now, podcasting the profession. Thanks for listening, and a big thank you again to Allison and Michael for joining us today and kind of setting right what the show got right and wrong.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, APL and Chad, and thank you, Allison, for the banter back and forth. And yeah, thank you guys.
So
Absolutely.
join your local affiliate organization, join AAPL or Renew, and have a Merry Christmas.
Amen.
Absolutely. Yeah, as Allison said, if you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe, don't so you don't miss future episodes, but also learn more about APL and our resources and membership opportunities by visiting landman.org. Until next time, I'm Chad Smith, and this has been Landman Now, podcasting the profession.